and welcome to another fabulous quick crop video. Well, today we're going to be adding to my little orchard that I'm planting here, and I'm going to show you how to plant an apple tree. Now, fruit trees are one of the best investments that you're going to make in your garden, and with a little care will produce wonderful crops of aromatic fruit for years. Now, a little extra care in planting will make a huge difference, both in how quickly it takes your tree to establish and then also its fruiting ability for its whole lifetime. So that extra care will pay dividends later on. The first thing that we need to think about is site and aspect. Now, apple trees will prefer shelter, so do avoid very exposed sites. Now, in my garden, the prevailing wind comes from the west, which is behind me here. And you can see, if you look along my laneway, we do have a shelter belt of trees, and that means that this part of the garden is spared the worst of the wind. If you have a wet garden, and I do, try and plant your trees on a bit of a slope like this, and this is to encourage the water to run off. If you don't have a slope, do try and create mounds or ridges to plant your trees into, because apples will hate waterlogged roots. Now, my little slope here, it faces southwest, so it also has the added advantage of getting the most from the available sunlight. And we can also see that we've got a line of ash trees behind me, and while they do provide valuable shelter, we don't want to plant too close to them because their roots will compete with the roots of our apple trees. Okay, so now we're down to the exciting bit, we're down to the trees. Now, whatever fruit trees you're planting, do soak them in water for about 2 hours and preferably overnight before you're planting. Now, the trees are available in two different types. You can get a bare root tree, which is like this, which obviously the roots are bare, and that's going to be planted when the tree is dormant in the winter months. And then also you can get a pot-grown plant. Now, I would recommend getting a bare root tree, and the reason for this is, in a pot-grown plant, the roots tend to spiral around and take on the shape of the pot. So we can see this on this plum tree, and the problem is that once the roots start spiraling around like that, they can continue this habit even after planting, and that means that the roots don't spread out away from the tree into the surrounding soil the way that we want them to. Remember that a tree root spreads over a very broad area as it goes off in search of nutrients, and a constricted root ball is going to restrict the feeding ability of the tree, so that's naturally going to stunt its growth, and of course it's going to lower its fruit production. Now, I'm going to leave these trees just soaking here for a little bit, and we're going to head off and I'm going to start to dig a planting hole. Now, unfortunately, most people never dig a hole large enough to plant a tree. The diameter really needs to be at least twice the length of the longest root, and in the case of pot-grown plants, you want it about 3 times the size of the pot. Now, today we're planting dwarf trees, so they're still pretty small, but even in that case, I'm going to be digging a hole with a diameter of 1 meter. It will be very beneficial to keep the area around the tree weed-free, so I'm removing the sod from the soil before I dig it. This leaves me with a nice clean area to work. I'm just sliding the spade underneath and flipping it over. I'm now going to dig the hole over to about 1 foot or at least a spade's depth, taking care to break up the soil at the bottom of the hole. Also, if you find any deep root perennial weeds, remove them as you go. Now that's our hole dug. Just one last thing, if you have a heavy clay soil, it's a good idea to also just break up around the edges of the hole like that, because if you've got a smooth edge, the roots of the plant of the tree are going to do exactly the same as they would in a pot and may spiral around, and of course we want them to grow out away from the tree. Now, you really want to put the stake in now before we plant the tree, and the reason for that is that we don't want to damage the roots, and then also we don't want to hit the tree by mistake while we're hammering it in. Now, as I've said, the prevailing wind is coming from behind me here. It's a bit windy today actually, you probably hear it on the microphone. So we're going to plant our stake into the prevailing wind, and we're going to be putting the tree in behind it. So I've put the stake a little bit over to this side of the hole, and we're just going to tap it in now with the sledgehammer. Now I'm just going to mix in some of this blood, fish and bone fertilizer into the soil I've taken out of the planting hole. Now blood, fish and bone, it's a natural slow release fertilizer, and I'm going to use very little, only about 2 handfuls. You want to avoid the temptation of putting in a lot of manure or garden compost, because you don't want the hole to be too fertile, because then the roots will be reluctant to leave and spread into the soil beyond, and as you know, we want a nice wide root system. And now we finally get to plant our tree. Now the important thing is that it needs to be planted just on the old soil level. Now it's difficult to see on this tree, but it's just above where these first roots start. Now the important thing is that any fruit tree you're planting is likely to be what's called grafted, and that means that the tree itself is actually growing on a different rootstock, and it's the rootstock that controls what size the tree is going to be. Now we can see quite clearly, if I just give it a bit of a wash here, the point here where the different color bark of the tree joins the root here, and it's important that this join is always kept above the soil level. So we're going to plant at about here, just above the first set of roots. Okay, now a handy tip here is just lay your spade across the hole, and the reason we do that is it's showing us the finished soil level. So if we take our tree here, it's just helpful for lining up that soil mark with the finished soil level, and I can see that this is about right now. Our soil level is just above our first set of roots there. Now it is actually really helpful to have somebody with you to help plant a tree, but we don't have that today, so I just want to fix it temporarily to the stake here, just using this tree tie. So now basically we just fill the soil in around the tree bit by bit, and kind of firming it down as you go. It also helps just to shake the tree every now and then like that, and that helps just settle the soil in around the roots. Now it's also a good idea, just if you look at the roots, to try and layer the roots at the original level that they were when the tree was planted, and that's going to just help them settle back into their new position nicely. Just pushing the soil in around the roots like that, a little bit of a shake just to bed it down. So then the last thing we do is just to put on our tree tie properly, and what we do is we just thread our strap through this little clasp here, and what that does then is the clasp goes around the tree like that, and then we put the rest of it around the stake. You can't see it now, the side that you're on, but we're just putting it through. It's just an ordinary strap. And then just to finish it off then, to keep the tie in the same place, it's always a good idea just to hammer a tack through it. Okay, well that's about it for today. Now remember that everything that you see in the video, including the apple tree, the watering can, the wheelbarrow, the tools, everything apart from me, are all available on our websites, quickcrop.ie and quickcrop.co.uk, along with everything else that you need for your very own fruit and vegetable growing adventure. I look forward to seeing you next time.